Love them or you hate them, Shroomlights are illuminating. They're found high in crimson trees and were added in the 1.16 nether update. They're something that's very polarizing, and I feel like some people don't enjoy the texture, but for me personally, they've been something that adds a little bit of visual interest and almost a squishiness to illumination blocks. I first started out this build with a little bit of terrain because I really wanted to spice it up. I wanted to add something a little bit different, and this would end up biting me in the butt later when I decided to put it into a terrain. But I knew I wanted this mushroom high above everything else. I wanted it to look grand, like it had been growing for very many years, and like something that had been taken place in the nature that it was surrounded by. I really love terraining, and it's something that I really enjoy doing in a lot of survival worlds, but it does burn me out after a while because it does take a lot of intensive care to where I feel like I take it a little bit too seriously, and I think of all the geographical structures and whether or not it can be held up and all that sort of stuff instead of just enjoying the process and trying to get it done. This was also when I started using World Edit, which was something that I am not familiar with, and I really was trying to learn the best I could while also making videos at the same time. I started off with a very basic shape. I knew that I wanted it to be trunk-like, but this was actually my first time ever building anything organic. And as you see, struggling again with World Edit, but we're trying to learn, and I wanted to have a very organic shape. But as I said, it was something that I've never done before, so it was a lot of pushing and pulling and trial and error in the actual shape of the structure to where it took me, I kid you not, quite a few hours to get this build done, just because of how perfectionist I was in wanting the shape and the organic size of it. But I am very proud of it, and looking back on it, I can't think of anything that I would have done differently just because of how new and fresh it was and how deep of a push I put into it and how much effort and work went into it. I knew I wanted to add some visual interest to it because I wanted it to be really tall, so I decided to add an offshoot mushroom down below just to add a little bit of visual intrigue and draw the eye upwards to where I wanted the main bell cap to be. This was the first big struggle of the build though. I had never done anything organic. I knew I wanted to have these real floppy shapes, but I wasn't sure how to actually do that in blocks. So it was a lot of trial and error, and I was flying in and out, looking from behind, looking from far away, trying to get the generalized shape, and I think in the end it ended up looking really well. There is a couple of things that I would smooth out and change, but overall for my first attempt at it, it was very, very impressive. Then it was back to the main structure. My least favorite part of this build, trying to get this height as well as the depth and the size of it right. I wanted everything to seem proportional, and I wanted it to seem like it was tapering off towards the bell head, but not so much that it would look like it would break under the weight of it. So it was a lot of pushing and pulling. I'd step back just like I would with landscaping and cliff work, and just make sure that I was adding in the right blocks at the right place and adding the volume where it needed to be. When making the bell cap, I decided that it would be best to get a generalized perimeter for it, but then to work from the inside out, because I didn't want any of the shade cast from the bell cap to impact the underneath side of it, whatever that's called. So once I had the general floppy shape in place, I went to work on the underside, trying to smooth it out and make it look visually interesting with some curves and arches, while also looking realistic, like it can support the weight. Once the underside of the mushroom was done, I wanted to add these drippy elements to the underside of the bell to give it a little bit more visual interest, and then it was just a matter of building up the top side like I would any sort of hillside or mountain, but it was a lot more pushing and pulling. I didn't know what layers I wanted to work in, if I wanted to work by 1s or 2s or 3s, so it was a lot of stepping back, flying back, looking at it from different angles to make sure that the entire thing felt cohesive and organic. As you can see here, I'm really struggling with the height. I didn't know how tall I wanted to make this, if I wanted to make it floppy or anything like that. So it was a lot of stepping back, looking at it, and then readjusting and smoothing it out how I saw fit. Then it was on to some basic texturing. I wanted the underside of the bell to differentiate from the stalk, so I tried to add a little bit of variation into it with lighter cream colors, and then on the lower bell I added in mud tones to break up the difference between the two bells, but also look a bit cohesive. With the underside done, now it was onto texturing the top side of the bell. I wanted them to be more mushroom-esque, you know, the red and white mushrooms for the lower section, and then for the upper section I just wanted to keep it very basic and just add in a couple of block variations for some interest. Now with the mushrooms done, I went on to the block that actually inspired the entire build. While I didn't use it as a main proponent in the build, I wanted to have it there just as a subtle hint. So because the build was so dark at this point, I wanted to add light sources hanging down from the top side of the bell to illuminate what I was going to build eventually underneath. And then because I'm such a glutton for punishment, I decided that this building could not be done without a little cozy witchy cottage hanging off the side, which it did definitely burn me out by the end of it. I was very, very tired after this build, but it looked so amazing in the end that I wouldn't have changed a single thing. I wanted to add the witchy build as something a little bit more earthy, but when I was building it, I wanted to add also pops of color, you know? So I decided to add in these large cherry sections, which at first were extremely daunting, but once I got in the texturing and all the detailing, these worked out so well and added the much needed pop of color to it. I wanted to keep it mostly organic, so I went with the moss roof to keep in line with the fungusy, mossy, foresty vibe that I wanted to go for once I seamed it. The detailing went as normal for the rest of this build, but I wanted to add in these composter and barrel elements into the support beams to add a little bit of texture difference, which in the end ended up looking really, really nice, and I would definitely do it again. I ended up reusing a lot of textures that I was using in other builds, which was really interesting to see them get used in a different setting and still work. It was something that I was very, very proud of when designing the block palettes initially, that they had such versatility to them. And oh my gosh, isn't this video so long? I've tried to speed it up so much, but just hearing myself talk for 9 minutes straight is definitely jarring. So if you have made it this far, drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, and all that call to arms stuff. Now, before I hear it in any comments or anything like that, I don't do interiors. It's something that I will eventually work on, maybe in a different side project or something like that. But for a lot of these builds, they're going to be interiorless until I decide otherwise. This doorway was so frustrating. I wanted a hobbit hole type looking thing, but it just wasn't blending with the terrain as well as I wanted it to, and in the end I just ended up giving up and just settling for what I had there. And with the final details going into place, that wraps today up. If you stayed with me this long, I really appreciate it. It means so much to me on this passion project journey. But with that being said, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.